and no one knows where or when.
This week, once again, it brought death and destruction to a region and alarmed a nation.
October 19th, 1989.
Tonight, we roll back the most dramatic images of the past 2 days. Tonight, you'll meet the people who lived them. On the bridge and under the highway.
Thanks to planning and luck, San Francisco is still standing. But what about dozens of other American cities unprepared for an earthquake? American cities are at risk and at fault.
Why would anyone who has lived through earthquakes...
And here's another aftershock or another earthquake happening right now. I'm not sure which. I'm going to get under this desk.
...or seeing the enormity of their destructive power, choose to live in their path? Why would anyone roll the dice? Tonight, living on the edge of disaster.
And a rare look inside the San Andreas Fault, the place where fury once again was unleashed this week. The place where the big quake everyone agrees is inevitable one day may begin.
From ABC News, this is Primetime Live. Reporting from San Francisco, Sam Donaldson. And from TV1 in New York, Diane Sawyer.
Good evening. 1 minute, there we were getting ready to watch the World Series on television. Modern people with a kind of technological mastery over the planet. And then, just seconds later, there was the rumble and an ancient terror. Tonight, we are going to tell you more about those 15 seconds and how they changed so many lives. Sam reports tonight from San Francisco. Sam?
Diane, I'm standing in the marina area of downtown San Francisco by the waterfront. This is one of the hardest hit places in the entire Bay region, primarily because many of these houses are built on landfill. And ironically, much of the landfill rubble was rubble from the 1906 earthquake. Some of the houses that didn't come down when the earthquake struck have been removed by authorities for fear that they would collapse and hurt someone. The dimensions of this disaster are still unknown. There have been thousands of aftershocks since the big one on Tuesday, and as far as the death toll is concerned, there are 30 bodies that have been recovered, but authorities know that it's going to go much higher. Diane?
Of course, every person in the city has a story to tell of that moment, and it's a measure of the modern television age that so many people were using home video recorders when the quake hit. We're going to show you now 2 recordings. The first was shot by a security camera. It was in a bar in Campbell, California. You'll see now that the bottles are going to begin moving, and all of a sudden a cascade of bottles. Now we'll replay that for you again to show you in slow motion exactly what happened when the quake hit. You can see that the woman behind the bar understandably is trying to get out of the way. Now, take a look at this video. It was shot by a mother at a private daycare center, which was just outside San Jose. This is being seen for the first time on network television.
See you later.
Get out. You know what? We'll stay here.
Imagine what goes through people's minds when they see an earthquake has struck and they feel that vibration and they are terrorized by it. All week long since the quake struck, you've seen a series of powerful, sometimes haunting images. The home video pictures of a car driving off a ruptured bridge and vanishing into thin air. One highway collapsing onto another. A cop issuing instructions to worried citizens seeking safety on the street as they go about their business, but they don't know exactly where to go. Because what do you do in the middle of an earthquake? You've seen those images again and again. What you haven't seen or heard are the stories behind those images. Our correspondent Judd Rose is here with us in San Francisco. We asked Judd to go out and find some of the stories that you've seen there, some of the images. We've asked Judd to look at the people who went through these horrifying experiences and hear from them their own stories. The stories about what they felt, how they acted. And here's Judd Rose in his investigative report.
It was Tuesday. It was 5:04 in the afternoon. In San Francisco, the earth moved, and time stood still.
Get out. You know what? Stay here.
The earthquake itself was over in a matter of seconds. What happened here after the ground stopped shaking was a series of moments. Moments of grief and grace. Moments of sudden death and small miracles. Moments that changed lives forever and turned ordinary people into heroes and victims. At 5:04 Tuesday, Bruce Steffen and Janice Freeberger were driving on the top deck of the Bay Bridge. Co-workers in a San Francisco realty company, they were returning to the office after a trip to Oakland.
All of a sudden the car started bouncing, and I thought I had a flat tire. I thought I must have run over glass or something like that, and the bouncing got worse.
There was this explosion. It sounded like dynamite, and right in front of us, I saw the upper deck split, and what was in front of us stayed, and we started to move down.
It just, the ground opened up, the car was heading down, and I had enough time to think that I was dead, that I was going to be dead, that there was nothing underneath me but water, and I was going through the ground.
But they were alive, hanging literally by a thread. As the bridge collapsed onto the deck below, the car fell through and caught on a piece of wreckage.
I felt like I was in a TV horror movie where any moment the car would go ahead and flip on over into the water.
Not far away on the Nimitz Freeway in Oakland, it was rush hour. The ground shuddered. The double-deck highway snapped and tumbled into a tomb for hundreds of drivers.
A lot of them had their brake lights on. There were some that it looked like, you know, somebody saw what was happening, hit their brakes, and then they came down on them, and the brake was still on.
Oakland firefighter David Honegger spent Tuesday night at the scene of the freeway collapse. It was his job to dig through the rubble, look for survivors, and finding bodies, mark the site with the initials DOA.
The trouble was that almost all the cars were smashed down to a foot or two in height. So the odds of anybody surviving it were just minimal.
But some did survive, like Kim Lin, a salesman. He was returning from a call when the freeway fell on him. He doesn't remember a thing.
Lived here my whole life. I always figured someday there would be an earthquake, but someday wasn't going to be the day that I was underneath there.
For most outside the Bay Area, the first word of the disaster came as they tried to tune in the third game of the World Series. The game never happened, of course. Instead, Candlestick Park wobbled and swayed, terrifying fans and players. Oakland A's pitcher Storm Davis frantically waved for his wife and baby to join him on the field.
You know, I was panicking. I thought that, the Candlestick was going to just cave in. But finally they got down there to me. I was able to take our baby from my wife and felt somewhat relieved.
At that moment, Maria Goldinger was heading home from work on the lower deck of the Bay Bridge. Suddenly, traffic came to a dead stop, and people fled their cars.
I get out of my car, I get the dog out of the car, and I scream to this guy. I go, "What is happening?" And he says, "Run! The bridge is caving in." I could not even comprehend what was going on. I visualized the bridge caving in, and it kept coming closer and closer to me, but still I knew all I could do was run, and all I could depend on was my legs, so I just kept running, and everybody else kept running.
Everybody, including Bruce Steffen and Janice Freeberger. They'd finally managed to free themselves from their car and were running for safety, even though Janice had severe injuries, including a broken chest bone and a badly cut leg.
How are you able to walk?
Here. I wanted off the bridge. I wanted away from there.
Janice Freeberger walked away from her brush with mortality. Almost no one walked away from Highway 880. One of those working tirelessly to free the living and find the dead, fireman Dave Peterson. On the job after the quake, he learned that his son, also a firefighter, was missing.
There was a group of them that I saw that were talking briefly, and I knew that they were talking about me or my son, and one of them came over and said that they did find him. He was alive.
Tim Peterson was found trapped in the very ruins his father was searching.
At one point, they couldn't free his legs, and I know my son asked for them to cut him off so that they could pull him out.
In the end, Peterson was pulled out, hurt, but his legs intact. And there would be another dramatic rescue here Tuesday night when searchers found a car pinned in the rubble with 4 people inside. Fireman Ron Carter was the first on the scene.
The adults in the front seat were fatalities, and the survivors were trapped in the back seat, were trapped underneath the seat, underneath the front seat. And that's where our efforts were concentrated on the front seat.
The survivors were two small children. One, a little girl, was pulled out safely, but her 6-year-old brother was trapped. Surgeon Jim Betts had to figure out how to free the boy, whose legs were pinned underneath the body of his mother.
Decision was made at that time to actually remove as much of her as we could, knowing that we couldn't totally extricate her, because from her waist down she was absolutely pinned under this concrete abutment. The other surgeon and I decided that the best way to do this would be to literally divide her body, and that's what we did.
But even that didn't free the boy. The only way was to amputate his leg.
We had a small area right over my shoulder where the other surgeon was working to get me equipment, and I literally had to lie on my stomach on the corner of the back seat of this car to reach down inside to get to his leg.
Finally, after 2 hours of surgery, the boy was freed. A small victory amid a major tragedy, a moment of heroism amid a week of horror, moments amid the madness that would end some lives and change others forever.
It's like a whole new life. It's not the same life I had before. I died back on the bridge. I don't know what I'm going to do. I figure at some point something's going to happen where I'll have a chance to do good, and I'll say, this is what this was all about. This is why I'm still here.
The people who live those moments will never forget them. In that sense, this earthquake is forever. But the people of the Bay Area also intend to go on, and great strides have been made toward resuming the daily routine. Just this evening it's starting. That's the shot of the Transamerica building that we want to show you in just a moment. And you can see the lights are going back on. The power is being restored. You're looking at that shot from the Goodyear blimp, which is high above the Bay Area, high above San Francisco. Power is being restored in many parts of the city. Now, the Bay Bridge, which links Oakland and San Francisco, will be closed for many weeks. That was the shot of the bridge this morning. But in a sense, traffic is back, nonetheless, moving, even though the lack of power at some San Francisco intersections requires a human traffic control. And the shoppers are back. Chinatown was bustling today, and elsewhere, downtown, people are going about their everyday lives. It is not correct to say things are routine again, but the chaos is over. And of course, amidst the death, there is new life. Just moments before the quake hit on Tuesday, 31-year-old Jaehan Han gave birth to her first child, Noah, in an Oakland hospital. She recalls her thoughts when the quake struck.
I was on the operating table having a C-section when the earthquake hit. At first I could hear the rumbling, and then the vibrations followed, and I could see the light fixtures above me moving and the instruments rattling and some of the plaster falling. The doctors assured me that everything was going to be okay. It was the safest room in the hospital, and sure enough, everything turned out fine, and now I'm a happy parent of a little baby boy, Noah.
When Primetime continues, come along with us on a ride in a B-25 for a close-up look of the San Andreas Fault. We'll track it all the way from Mexico to Northern California, and we'll take you inside the fault to see what might trigger another big quake. From New York, Primetime, brought to you by Extra Strength Tylenol. Trusted for your everyday aches and pains. It's the pain reliever hospitals use most.
4 years ago, I wound up in the hospital after I hurt my Achilles tendon in a basketball game. I hobbled around on it for a couple of days. The doctor told me I had to go to the hospital, and while I was there, the hospital gave me Tylenol. It worked great for me, and got rid of all the pain that I had.
Greg Denton trusts Tylenol, the pain reliever hospitals use most.
I trust Tylenol because it's done the right things for me, and the hospital recommended it, so that makes me feel even better.
Now try new gelatin-coated gel caps, only from Tylenol.
You can imagine this tower was 300 feet tall. And when it hit his house, and then you see how it flattened the metal. So we got a real good whip out of it.
Hurricane Hugo surprised many people. Allstate's catastrophe team was ready.
With Allstate coming and the adjuster coming as quickly as he did, I think you need them. I really think you need to have a good insurance company like Allstate. Allstate came through when they had to. And I'm glad we have it.
He lost his mother and his way, but he never lost his will to survive. What he found can only be seen through the eyes of the bear. The most unique adventure story ever filmed. The Bear. Rated PG. Parental guidance suggested. Starts Friday, October 27th.
The evaluation committee is in your office.
This is my husband, Paul. He's under a lot of pressure. But now he's taking charge of his health, eating right by cutting down on cholesterol and saturated fat. That's why I cook with Puritan, with no cholesterol and proven 94% saturated fat-free. Better than any other kind of oil.
Your wife Paul, sneakers before dinner?
Hey, Mr. Principal, carry your books?
Anytime.
Paul's feeling great, and I am too.
Puritan. Make it your oil for life.
Everyone's jumping for joy. Friday's almost here.
Hello.
With Full House and a brand new family.
Eddie got straight A's.
6 A's? $5 a piece? You owe me $40, Dad.
Family Matters all Friday.
Saturday. Something is scaring the women of Palm Beach. On the ABC Saturday Mystery, Burt Reynolds is B.L. Stryker.
Before we move ahead, in the past 48 hours, we have heard constant reference to the Richter scale, and we assume you have too. So we thought we'd stop now for just about 30 seconds and tell you a little bit more how it works.
This man, Charles Richter, an American seismologist, developed the earthquake measurement system in 1935, rating the Earth's vibrations on a scale of 1 to 10. A 1 on the Richter scale is barely noticeable, like vibrations caused by a tractor-trailer on a highway. But a 5 or 6 on the Richter scale can't be ignored. And don't be misled by what seem to be small differences in degree. Every time you go up a number on the Richter scale, you're registering 10 times the force of the number before. In other words, an 8 is 10 times as powerful as a 7 on the Richter scale. Soon after scientists learned how to measure earthquakes, they began designing buildings which could survive them. Today's skyscrapers withstand the shifting of the earth because they're built on special foundations. Rubberized cushions and reinforced steel enable these new buildings to sway back and forth as much as several feet without falling. As it turned out, San Francisco's modern skyscrapers were the safest place to be during the recent earthquake. Some of its older structures couldn't absorb the shock. They cracked and came tumbling down.
And of course, that quake, as so many before it, apparently began in California's San Andreas Fault. It is a name you have probably heard again and again, but perhaps seen only as a line on a map. But we're going to take you now on a tour, not one you can book through any travel agency. This morning, we chartered a B-25 and had it flown over the fault, from the Salton Sea in Southern California to Point Reyes, north of San Francisco, a distance of 450 miles. The voice you're about to hear belongs to Arthur Sylvester, a geologist who has studied the San Andreas Fault extensively, and he flew along with us on the ride.
Today we're going to follow the San Andreas Fault north out of Mexico as it slices through California farmland to San Francisco. The shadow of the aircraft marks the trace of the fault on the ground. As we approach the deep canyon here, we're going on up through the Mojave Desert past Los Angeles, which is about 40 miles from the San Andreas Fault at this point. Our flight path drops into still another deep canyon north of Los Angeles, and the fault follows the bottom of the canyon. The fault is easy to follow in many places because it's marked by gullies and straight lines. You can see the shadow of the plane following the trace of the fault. The aircraft engine points along the trace of the fault here, marked by sharp gullies in the middle of the picture. This is farm and ranch land devoid of vegetation, and hardly any people live here. Here the fault makes a great scar on the landscape, as if someone had dragged a giant stick along the ground. Again, the shadow follows the fault. James Dean tragically met his death here at the intersection of the fault and Highway 46 in Central California. Now we're in Chelan Valley, where the fault goes through Randolph Hearst Ranch. The fault also goes through the Elmet Inn Winery in Central California. Parkfield, where earthquakes have happened almost every 22 years for the last 150 years, and where seismologists think one of the next earthquakes will happen on the San Andreas Fault system. In the San Francisco earthquake of 1906, it all started here in San Juan Bautista. Fault ruptured about 200 miles north towards San Francisco. Lexington Reservoir was the epicenter for the major earthquake that struck the San Francisco Bay region just a few days ago and caused so much tragic damage there. The San Andreas Fault does not go through San Francisco, but passes offshore of the Golden Gate and comes back on shore, the Point Reyes Peninsula area. In 1906, fences and roads were offset 15 feet here. The fault goes through here past Point Reyes National Seashore, up through Tamales Lagoon, across Bodega Head, and then goes on out to sea.
Now that you've seen the fault from the air, we'll take you to it on the ground, to an area that some people say could be the site of the next great earthquake. Joining us now from the Cajon Pass, which is about 100 miles northeast of Los Angeles, is Dr. Tom Henye. He is a professor of geophysics at the University of Southern California and is an expert on the San Andreas Fault. Dr. Henye, first of all, you're not going to do anything too exuberant here, are you? That looks fairly treacherous.
Yes, I'm Diane. I'm hanging here on the side of a outcropping in the San Andreas Fault Zone.
What is responsible for that jagged formation?
Well, it's very highly fractured from repeated motions along the San Andreas Fault. As the San Andreas moves and grinds along in its inexorable movement, it fractures the rocks all around it, and you can see some of the fractures here in the shadows in the nighttime.
Well, is this hard rock?
This rock, Diane, was formed initially about 10 miles or so into the earth. It was very, very hard and compacted at that time, but it's been brought to the surface and at the same time sheared and fractured by the San Andreas Fault movements. It's so fractured, in fact, that you can see that when I take my hammer here, big chunks of the rock fall off of the outcropping. As a matter of fact, there are pieces that I can even just break and fracture with my hand into very, very, very small pieces of rock, so shattered by the movements on the fault, just like a windshield at the time of an automobile crash.
Just the result of that abrasion. Let me ask you this, how deep is the plate that you're standing on? How deep in the earth?
Well, the plate here is approximately 50 miles down, we believe. It's a brittle outer part of the crust that's floating on a more mobile part of the inner part of the earth.
And underneath that?
Well, below that, of course, is the core. Now, the outer part of the earth below the crust is very viscous, and it's like taffy, and the plates move across this region.
Well, the ancients, at least the Oriental ancients, used to say that earthquakes were caused by large fish which moved under the earth and flapped their tails. You're saying it really does have the quality, I guess, of a waterbed, to use a loose term.
No, we don't have that. We don't have the fish out here. We have giant forces which are constantly at work pushing on these plates, and the stresses build up, and after some time, which we still don't understand, the plates give way and we have a giant earthquake like we experienced in San Francisco.
Oh, well, Dr. Henye, we thank you very much for joining us tonight, and do make your way down carefully for us, please.
My pleasure. I hope it doesn't move while I'm getting down.
So do we. Thank you very much. Another thing that we noticed in the past couple of days was a kind of somber record achieved. More telephone calls were placed in this country than ever before in history. So we thought tonight we would take you to the AT&T Network Operations Center in Bedminster, New Jersey. And you can see there are the maps on the wall, and there are the graphs of the telephone calls which are coming in. And joining us now is Jim Nelson, who is the Director of Operations at AT&T, and we thank you. A record number of calls, Mr. Nelson. What was that like in the center, the moment at which those calls started coming through?
It was extremely hectic, although sort of a balanced hectic, I might add. As you know, as folks turned in to watch the World Series, what they got was essentially a primetime earthquake, and the power of television was very evident in what we had to deal with.
You could see it behind you? You could see it start to light up on those screens?
Yes, we could, and if I can demonstrate, let me show you a couple of maps the way they normally are and then what we used to see. You'll see a blank map of the United States that they're now pointing to, and it's not very attractive visually, but that's what the AT&T network usually looks like. Things are smooth. Business and residence customers are getting through the first time they try it. Now, Tuesday night, you should see a map behind me coming up. Yep,
we
right
do
there.
see it now. We see it with the full ferocity of the calls placed.
Exactly. You can see what is a real jumble of lines and focusing really in on that Bay Area, and to give you some sense of what happened in that first hour. Okay, in that first hour alone on Tuesday, we had over 5 million calls. Customers tried to call the Bay Area, and that compares with a day, 24 hours, when only 3.5 million people try to call it. So it was a tremendous surge of calling.
How did you get the calls out? Did you have to do a kind of carom shot to get them out? Or could most of the people phone directly out?
Well, we help the calls get out, and our first concern when you have this type of an event is to make sure the people in that stricken area can call out. And perhaps you can see again over my shoulder, calling from San Francisco to Atlanta, for example, we'd use almost any part of the country. Our computers would take you to Florida, to New York, down through Texas. We'd move around at will to make sure that we can get as many calls out of the area as possible.
A final question to you, Mr. Nelson. As somebody who sits on the other end of that phone line often and hears the recording and wonders, is it just me or is everybody being treated equally? How does your computer decide which calls get through and which don't on limited lines?
Well, I assure you that we treat everybody equally, Diane. Basically, we don't want this large network of ours to slow down for our customers, so when they put such a demand on it, we ask the computers to sort of modify how many calls can get on at any one time. And we do it sort of equally across the country as best we can.
So it's random. I don't have to feel personally offended.
No, as a matter of fact, I'd love to be able to get your call through for you personally, but I think if you try a couple of times, you'll get through. It's been a lot better today, although, as you may have noticed, we had a small aftershock out in the Santa Cruz Mountains about 2 hours, and we have seen some calling, but I would, it's much more moderate than it has been in the past, and I would urge your viewers not to jump to the phones either.
No commercials here.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. We appreciate your being with us tonight, and we have much more ahead.
To help relieve head cold misery, you need full prescription strength Actifed. Of the 3 leading cold medicines once sold by prescription, only one still comes in its original maximum strength formula, only Actifed. To help relieve the stuffy, drippy misery of a head cold. Remember, Actifed.
Hey, how you doing? How are you? Not bad. Fine. I'm kind of hungry. Are you? Yes. That's good, because look over there. What? You see what I see? Whoa, double cheeseburgers. Exactly. Watch this. You're going to like this. Here we go. Coming through, playing through, fellas. Watch your back. Watch. Got it.
Oh, thank.
Not bad.
Burger King BK Doubles, featuring the barbecue bacon double cheeseburger and the new salsa double with jalapeno cheese. BK Doubles, only at Burger King.
Got mine. What's that? Greg Rupkinick.
ABC Sports takes you inside out. First NBA action is back when the Denver Nuggets take on Europe's finest in the McDonald's Basketball Open. Then it's out to the turf track as top thoroughbreds compete in the oldest international grass race, the Budweiser International. That's all live Sunday on ABC Sports.
This is what happens when a strong earthquake strikes a region that hasn't taken the necessary precautions to protect itself. This is Armenia. Today, 10 months after a powerful quake rocked the Soviet Republic. And these are pictures of cities far from Armenia, but also located near faults. American cities that could be at risk. Cities that might not be doing enough to protect their citizens. We'll have that story when Prime Time continues after this from our ABC station.
Friday, American technology is being stunted, all because we're afraid of a lawsuit. Plus, getting inner city kids on the right track. This man has a formula that's working. and chilling stories of bravery and human kindness. The earthquake heroes who risked their lives to rescue others. Watch 2020 Friday.
Coming up at 11 on our Channel 7 News Earthquake Report, the weather is changing and engineers working on the Cyprus collapse are worried about rain. We'll bring you the forecast and the latest from the scene. We'll tell you one of the greatest frustrations facing earthquake victims of the Marina District, and we'll bring you the latest information that might improve your morning commute. And more pictures of the earthquake as it happened. Join us on 7 at 11.
Shakespeare from Julius Caesar. Passion, I see, is catching. I sure hope so.
Elizabeth Taylor's Passion, and now Swirling Embers, your gift with any purchase from the Elizabeth Taylor's Passion collection. Available at Emporium.
What else can we do? We've got closing stocks every day. Isn't that enough? We've got the weekend section on Friday, before the weekend. Wasn't that a big idea? I guess it wasn't big enough. We've got the neighborhood report. What else is there? What? What more can we do to make this darn paper great?
The earthquake has left many of our Bay Area neighbors in need of aid. To help, send your donation to the American Red Cross, care of KGO TV and radio. We'll see that it gets to them.
ABC News Primetime Live continues. Once again, Diane Sawyer.
As our eyes traveled the globe this week, gauging world reaction to the quake in San Francisco, we turned our gaze inevitably back to the Republic of Armenia in the Soviet Union, because less than a year ago, an earthquake of just the same size, 6.9 on the Richter scale, hit Armenia. But the death toll was 100 times worse. 25,000 people died. Chief correspondent Chris Wallace revisits the place where they say fortune has a brother who comes more often, misfortune.
Hamlet Moradian, his wife Mariam, and 12-year-old daughter Narine have been living in this tent since last December's earthquake, living through one Armenian winter and now preparing for another.
Very cold and they're almost freezing. If they switch off that oven for a while, it will be a freezer, like in a freezer. He says if a dog has a good master, he lives better than they do.
These days, many people here live worse than dogs. 10 months after the earthquake, some 50,000 Armenians are still homeless, still living in tents or wooden shacks or prefabricated boxes. Families that survived the quake have been forced to split up. And with no prospects for getting permanent homes soon, people we talk with in the hard-hit town of Leninikon are losing hope.
It's winter soon, and they have no gas to heat, they have no electricity. She has 5 people in her family that perished.
How do you feel about the future?
What future? If she's left without 5 of her family, she has no future.
The Armenian earthquake may have been no bigger than this week's quake in California, but the impact was far more devastating. One reason can be seen in these abandoned apartment buildings, still waiting to be torn down. Although this area had quakes before, buildings were put up sloppily with weakened concrete. At the first tremor, they collapsed, burying thousands. And that was another problem. The Soviet rescue effort was slow to get started, leaving many of those in the rubble to die. The natural disaster and the human mistakes were not the end of Leninikon's troubles, though, but just the beginning of a long, painful recovery. It started when Mikhail Gorbachev came here just after the earthquake and said that the area would be rebuilt within 2 years. Government officials now talk about a 5-year plan. Construction schedules are in a shambles, as the government has failed to meet one deadline after another for new housing. Johannes Riekert, head of the International Red Cross effort here, says it's another case of Soviet inefficiency.
Now we have problems because of a deficit of material. The reconstruction companies of Soviet Union have a lack of concrete, a lack of cement, a lack of pipes for sewage, so that slows the work down here.
To make matters worse, the recovery effort has become embroiled in a regional conflict. The neighboring Soviet Republic of Azerbaijan blockading rail deliveries to Armenia in a dispute over territory. And so, 10 months later, the people of Leninikon continue to dig out. The government says it's learned its lesson. imposing strict new regulations on construction. But in a classic case of Soviet logic, it hasn't put up any buildings since then.
They passed the law, they made the law, but the implementation, if possible or not, with a lack of concrete, of high-quality concrete, that I doubt.
Still, for all their own problems, the Soviets are also paying attention to the California earthquake. Reversing what happened last year, Soviet President Gorbachev this week sent his condolences to President Bush. And Gorbachev also offered to send relief assistance to the U.S. Diane?
Well, Chris, you say President Gorbachev is paying attention. What about the people in Armenia? How much do they know or read?
Well, they are certainly well aware of what's going on in California because pictures of the earthquake have been all over the national news here in the Soviet Union. I think it would be fair to say that no one is more sensitive to the devastating effects of one of these earthquakes than the people of Armenia. And it's been quite moving during our brief time here. When people find out that we're Americans, they come over to us. They say how sorry they are about what's happened this week. And some of them also say that they hope that no one will share what they now share with the people of California, and that is having to live through one of these terrible incidents.
Does it make sense to wonder in this era of glasnost whether there's been any political repercussion for Moscow from this lethal incompetence that caused so many deaths?
I tell you, Diane, there are political repercussions to almost everything in this country now, and indeed, even with this earthquake, one of the interesting things in Armenia, we were over in the Soviet Union doing a political story, came down here after the earthquake, and one of the interesting things is the remarkable sense of distance, or even hostility that people here feel towards Moscow. It's kind of like the way people in the United States, some of them talk about Washington, although even much less friendly. And I think the earthquake has played into that because people here, many of them that we talked to in Leninikon, were quite bitter, felt that this was one more case of the central government not taking care of them in a time of terrible need. As you say, in the Soviet Union right now, there is a growing restiveness, a growing feeling of alienation on the part of many of the republics. And so in addition to being a natural disaster, the earthquake has also had its political aspects as well.
Okay, Chris, thank you. Before we leave, by the way, what time is it there right now?
It's, well, let me take a look. It's 6:37 Friday morning here in the Soviet Union.
All right,
so
thank you.
We got to start on you.
All right, thanks, Chris. And now we'll do a little homegrown political thinking. Sam Donaldson in San Francisco.
Diane, at times of crisis in this country, Americans expect their political leaders to take charge and come forward. And if the crisis is big enough, it is the president who invariably steps forward, particularly in this media age.
In the past decade, we've seen President Carter in the control room at the 3 Mile Island, Pennsylvania nuclear accident, appropriately clad in protective yellow boots. We've seen President Reagan helping pass sandbags while the cameras focused in during a Fort Wayne, Indiana flood. Galoshes seemed the right thing to wear there. Only last month, we saw President Bush touring hurricane-ravaged Charleston, South Carolina. Informal baseball jacket was his order of the day. And yesterday, Vice President Quayle, already in California, hurried to the Bay Area to inspect the earthquake damage. He topped off his baseball jacket with jogging shoes.
And tomorrow, President Bush comes here to the Bay Area and spends at least 3 hours touring the damage here. One of the people he'll meet is the mayor of San Francisco, Mayor Art Agnos. Mr. Mayor, you're going to welcome the president here tomorrow?
Well, absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing him and showing him what we've experienced here in San Francisco, especially in this part of the area, that city that's been so badly impacted.
Well, now, is this a change of heart? Because yesterday you refused to meet Vice President Quayle.
Well, that's not correct. I didn't refuse to meet him. What I was upset about was that he didn't bother to go 15 blocks up the street to find me or inquire about where the mayor was so that we could talk about firsthand. He talked to some volunteers around here and then left town after talking to the media. The president's been much different. His advanced people found me walking the streets right down the block here and said that the mayor wanted to talk to him before the whole Quayle incident.
Well, now, but you left the impression, Mr. Mayor, you thought Vice President Quayle had just flown here for political purposes and not because they were truly interested in the devastation.
Well, that's certainly what the impression he left behind when he circled in a helicopter, dropped down to the ground, took a few interviews, took a quick walk, talked to some volunteers, and took off again. Yeah, but it's been much different with all the other politicians, Republican or Democrat.
Let's be fair now, Howard. You are a Democrat. Why shouldn't people say it's just Agnos, the Democrat, hitting the Republican vice president, who seems to be an easy target these days?
Well, because I haven't hit the Republican president who contacted me. In fact, his people found me on the streets of San Francisco. Our Republican governor found me. We had a meeting this morning, worked out some good things for the people. Our Republican senator found me. We've been working together. The Republican secretary of HUD, Jack Kemp, found me and talked to me. A lot of Republicans have been finding me. So I don't think this is political. I just think it was a thoughtless effort on his part.
So if the Republicans will come find Agnos, that's all right.
Absolutely. Republicans and Democrats are pulling together. This has nothing to do with politics. It was just another thoughtless action on his part.
Okay, let's look at what San Francisco needs at the moment. Where do we stand in the cleanup and in trying to restore the normalcy?
San Francisco is just about 80% back to normal. This part here that obviously you're looking at is not and isn't going to be, but it's about 8 to 10 square blocks that's been heavily impacted. The rest of the city is in good shape. Our buses are running. We're even planning an opera and symphony performance this weekend as is regular routine. The football team's going to be playing this weekend. So while we are not obviously distracted from taking care of these people, the rest of the city is up and running and functioning well.
A lot of people died in this area, but you seem to suggest it could have been a lot worse.
Oh, absolutely. We were very lucky in that we had 9 fatalities in San Francisco now. There have been other fatalities, as you know, in the other parts of the earthquake area, but we were very lucky because we not only got some decent breaks from the elements in that it happened in the daytime, the winds were not as fierce as they are usually, and most of all, there were none of our city's vital organs that were knocked out by the earthquake. Police stations were operative, fire, our health personnel, our hospitals, our emergency ambulances were able to respond at full strength, and then they were quickly supplemented by all of the emergency personnel who came in. So we were able to respond quickly and forcefully and at full strength, and we, I think, handled it very well.
Yet, Mayor, there's some indication that some of this could have been prevented. The Bay Bridge, for instance, apparently in 1936 when it was built to withstand this kind of a jolt, but it didn't. Across the bay in Oakland, there was evidence before the quake last Tuesday that that particular stretch of the freeway was unsafe. Why couldn't these things have been built right? Earthquake to California is not an unexpected tragedy.
Yeah, I am not aware of any prior information that the Bay Bridge needed some kind of additional strengthening. I know that the officials involved would have made sure that was done. So I'm sure, I talked to the governor this morning, he expressed the same kind of amazement that now people are suggesting that there was some prior knowledge, and he's going to conduct a full inquiry to find out exactly who knew and what they knew and why they didn't tell us, or tell him more importantly, being the person responsible for it.
Thank you very much, Mayor Art Agnos of San Francisco. Good luck in your cleanup here and in trying to restore normalcy to this beautiful city by the bay. And we'll be back with more in just a moment.
When prime time continues, you may think of earthquakes as a California phenomenon. However, cities all over the United States are located near faults, but only a few are taking steps to make their buildings earthquake-proof, and there could be dire consequences.
Guess what? There's no bathroom on the bus.
Relax.
But diarrhea usually comes back.
Took the Imodium AD, didn't you?
Yeah, but just a little cup.
Perfect.
Imodium AD often stops diarrhea with 1 dose, instead of all those spoonfuls you may need of the leading remedy.
10-minute rest stop.
You coming?
Nope, I'm fine. Imodium AD. It can make your first attack of diarrhea your last.
You are here in the pursuit of one thing, an atomic bomb.
In a time that demanded the most of America, he demanded the most of men.
So what is it you're working on? What is it that's so damn important?
It is important. She's a card-carrying communist. Tell her. Goodbye.
The task was impossible.
We can give this country the biggest stick in the playground, and I intend to do that.
But his passion was undeniable.
I can do it without you. Well, if you do, and something goes wrong, let go!
I wanted to tell him I love him, because he's going to die.
It's a crisis of conscience. You got one job, Doctor. Give me the bomb.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Paul Newman, Fat Man and Little Boy, rated PG-13, starts Friday, October 20th at a theater near you.
You have to drive it to believe it. The new Accord. Sunday.
You know how she feels about fix-ups?
She'll love it. Trust me.
Oh, for my dead body. You're a really nice guy, but I know that look. I'm engaged.
Life goes on.
Tonight on Nightline, a close-up look at one of the areas hardest hit by the California earthquake, and at another disaster that's been almost lost in the shuffle tonight.
Live from San Francisco and New York, Primetime continues. Once again, Diane Sawyer.
Many of us here on the East Coast and in the Midwest watched the horrifying events unfold in Northern California this week, and I think if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of us thought to ourselves, there but for the grace of God go I. As Jackie Judd now tells us, that may be truer than a lot of people think.
The night the San Andreas fault shook San Francisco, the nation watched from what most of us assumed was a safe distance. Not necessarily so.
There are literally millions of faults across the country. One of them runs across Manhattan, from the East River to the Hudson River and beyond. In fact, I'm standing near it right here, right in the middle of Central Park. This one is harmless, as most of them are. Geologists say they're worried about those few that have moved in the recent past, in the last 50,000 years or so.
Of course, the San Andreas, which scars the length of California, is the most active. But the new Madrid zone in the Mississippi Valley is a close second. It regularly sets off little quakes, thousands of them. Experts agree that Memphis is the city most exposed to the threat of a bigger one.
Scary, it really is. I don't know how to react.
It makes me feel like that we could be wiped away. Just, you know, all it takes is for it to come. And it will come eventually.
Some government scientists say there's a 75% chance a big one will ripple through the new Madrid zone by the turn of the century. Besides Memphis, St. Louis, perhaps even Chicago and New York could lie in its path.
The potential for destruction and just really catastrophe from a large earthquake in the central United States really can't be understated.
New Madrid last caused a huge quake in the early 1800s. It created this lake in Memphis. Memphis is a city built on mud, so it's especially vulnerable. Its modern high-rises probably wouldn't fall. They're flexible, built to sway in the wind. But older buildings like this one and this, experts expect, would crumble. Critics say that Memphis just isn't taking the quake threat seriously enough. The city council decided not to make this new sports complex quake-resistant.
I felt we were being irresponsible as a group in not investing money to protect the public from something that I see could happen in the Memphis area.
Other earthquake hotspots are here in Salt Lake City. The Wasatch Fault runs along its eastern side. And in the northwest, an earthquake zone called Cascadia subduction dips beneath Seattle and Portland. But the big questions remain. When and where will the next one hit?
I'm a little pessimistic now that we're ever going to be able to say tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock we're going to have an earthquake.
But to the question, can it happen here in Memphis and Seattle and St. Louis and more? The answer is yes.
Well, of course, it did happen here in the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Area, and when a big story breaks like an earthquake, the news media go to work in a big way. And oddly enough, in covering this earthquake, television has had an easier time of it than the local newspapers. TV remote trucks, like the ones we're using right here in this area, just turn on their onboard power generator, point their antenna dish at a relay satellite, and go on the air. But for the San Francisco newspapers, the earthquake was not only a big story, it was a big obstacle.
The Morning Chronicle, for instance, like the Afternoon Examiner, has been published each day as usual, but not at all by the usual methods. The newspaper's building has had no main electric power. Only a few lights have been jury-rigged. Only a partial computer system is available. Most of the phones have been out. It isn't just bad, it's been awful, according to executive editor William German.
It seemed impossible to gather news, to edit news, to produce copy, to then produce a page for printers. None of that was available. We had to invent a new system.
Old way or new, lights or no lights, the heart of the news business is getting the facts and putting them in perspective.
Anybody else interested? There will be the survivors list coming too, right?
We're just going to spike it. We sent a second take with the insert, so they're just going to go back to the original.
For the Chronicle, all this has been a group effort, with reporters Randy Schultz and Susan Sword rewriting the field information to come up with the lead story.
Scores of reporters are in the field, and they call their notes in, and they often want to tell you more detail than you need, and you have to politely try to take what you need and hang up on them and go on to the next person that wants to talk to you.
Do you have a pride of authorship that says, touch one word and you're dead?
No, not at all. And on a story like this, you can't permit yourself to have that. You have to approach it with no ego. And if your pal turns to you and says, Susan, I can't believe that. That's unbelievably trite. You have to be able to look at him and say, you're right. What do you suggest?
And urge parents to contact their children.
I think we should just say heard and then just say parents are urged.
Okay.
Careful words and careful pictures. Here, the challenge always is to take and print a gripping shot. But photographer John O'Hara says for him, there are limits.
You want to get close to the point, but at the same time, the human being, the person's dead. And once somebody's died, they're gone. I mean, you know, but you want to show a little bit of respect.
When the building front collapsed at 6th and Townsend in San Francisco, crushing autos and killing 5 people, respect for O'Hara meant shooting it this way.
When they finally cut off the top part of the car, and I could see a little bit of the person, I took a picture. There was no face, there was just an arm or something. Then when they lifted her up, and she was intact, and they carried her out of the car, I didn't take a picture, because I don't need that kind of a photo. I don't enjoy it. You know, I feel for the person.
Like the photographers, when the reporters write, they must consider a mix. In the case of Randy Schultz and Susan Sword, who are writing the lead story, the trick is to combine hard facts with gripping prose. And when you're writing the lead, which is the most important?
It's a constant balancing act. You're trying to do both all the time, and you succeed in a limited measure often because you're under such a time pressure. But I love that challenge. I'm a team player, so I see everybody that fed the story to us, all the editors that looked at it. But when I stand in the line for my donuts in the morning and I can look and see the paper and people are reading it and you know what's in it, that is a special feeling. It's part of why I'm in the business.
Well, here's this morning's Chronicle, and here's the lead sentence that Randy and Susan composed. A determined but battered Bay Area, faced with mounting casualties and soaring damage estimates, prepared yesterday to bury its dead and repair the destruction wrought by Tuesday's massive earthquake. Diane, what do you think? Does that lead sentence sort of sum it up?
Oh, I think the lead has to be that life does go on. I'm always struck by the beauty of ordinary daily things after a dark and terrifying night, that a jogger went jogging, that a baby was born, that someone went to work. So yeah, I think it was. Let me ask you, what about the people of San Francisco? Did they feel that the huge deluge of media there helped or interfered?
Well, I don't know that the people of San Francisco actually cared one way or the other, but I think your point is very well taken, that we all descended on this area. Not only the local reporters who were here tried to do their jobs, as you've seen, but the rest of us came in trying to report to the country and, for that matter, the world. And naturally, we centered on destruction like this. There was a lot of destruction, a lot of death. The freeway over in Oakland. This is the marina area, as we've already explained. The building that collapsed, that John O'Hara, the photographer, took shots of people being drug out of the cars. And the impression one gets from all of that is that this city is in flames, that this city is shattered. It's easy to get that because we're showing what happened. But Diane, the fact is that the vast majority of buildings in the Bay Area were untouched. They were shaken, but they're still there. And the vast number of people in the Bay Area, while having a moment of panic, certainly last Tuesday, are going ahead with their lives, as you suggest. Life goes on, and so are they.
Any single image you're going to be bringing home, a dominant one?
Well, I guess the dominant image, aside from the destruction in the areas where you see it dramatically and graphically, as you do here, is of people that are picking themselves up. I mean, at times of crisis, we always say that because it's always true. It's in the human nature to do that. And so we always say when we're trying to end broadcasts like this, and so the people of this indomitable state and this indomitable city pick themselves up. But that is the fact. You saw the cop on the corner in one of our pieces of video who was directing traffic and people in the cars. And one thing that people say to me out here is that they've noticed that in times of crisis, there are not looters here in San Francisco or Oakland. There are people who are not only polite, but they try to help each other.
I'll tell you what my dominant image was. It's really a phrase. A geologist said to me on the phone today. He said, just remember, this wasn't the big one, and the big one is going to come.
You mean we'll be back?
I dread it. I hope not. But we will be back, of course, with more prime time in the weeks to come. So I'll say goodnight from here. I'm Diane Sawyer.
And I'm Sam Donaldson in San Francisco. Later tonight on Nightline, Ted Koppel will tell us more about this story and the damage and destruction and the pick-me-ups that these area cities are doing right now around this great bay. And we'll be back on a Thursday when the World Series is played. We're not certain yet, so it may not be next week. But one of these Thursdays soon, we'll be back with another edition of Primetime Live.
Good morning, Joanne.
Approved, yes?
Right, and Steve knows about the change, the exclusion of the top 10.
This is my husband, Michael. He's under a lot of pressure, but now he's doing things differently. Like taking the stairs, eating more fruit, and cutting down on cholesterol and saturated fat. That's why I cook the foods he loves with Puritan oil. Puritan has no cholesterol and is 94% saturated fat-free. I've got an idea.
The health club before dinner. Great.
Michael is feeling wonderful. And I am too.
Puritan. Make it your oil for life.
The headache feels like a rubber band going around my head. It's the temples, the muscles down the neck. I have pain. I hurt.
Today, Darnell Moore is trying extra-strength Tylenol gel caps. For pain like his, why take aspirin or ibuprofen when nothing works better than Tylenol gel caps?
No throb, no headache, and definitely no rubber band. I'm going to go with the gel caps. Gel caps work.
Extra-strength gel caps, only from Tylenol. For everyday pain, nothing works better.
There are four sides to this story. Linda's...
Sir, what do you think about your son and me adopting his child?
My heart is so full. She has to loosen her bra.
Michael's...
Well, have you decided if you want a boy or a girl? I don't know, Michael. What do you think?
I think what you think.
Lucy's...
The doctor's going to give me a sonograph tomorrow. It's like this x-ray to see if it's retarded or a boy.
And Sam's...
It's a big responsibility. They wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes more than once.
Immediate Family, rated PG-13. Starts Friday, October 27th at select theaters.
Next, the special Channel 7 News earthquake report. Recovery efforts continue on the collapsed Cypress superstructure on Highway 880, and of course, we'll have a live report for you. And we'll also take you to San Francisco's marina, where there was good and bad news today.
And keep a pencil handy. We'll give you phone numbers you might need, and we'll hear more on the Caltrans plans for the Bay Bridge repair. We'll also find out how ferries and BART have come to the rescue of East Bay commuters, and show you the quake as it happened on yet another video and security cam. Good evening, I'm Ana Chavez.
And I'm Pete Wilson. Martin Wyatt is here. We'll have the reaction to the quake from the Giants and the A's. Meteorologist Peter Giddings will tell us what the weather will bring, and it will bring a great deal. It's going to be very important to listen to this forecast. This is not going to help us. Channel 7 News special earthquake report is next.
Sunday.
$500 says you choke right now.
Paul Newman and Tom Cruise.
You used me!
Yes, I did. I'm not your daddy, I'm not your boyfriend, so don't be playing games with me.
I'm back.
The Color of Money, Sunday. It started with a burglary.
Wiretaps, breaking and entering.
And led to a cover-up.
Tell Elliot Richardson to fire him now.
He was the President of the United States. AT&T presents The Final Days, Sunday, October 29th. Send $4 to 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007.
This is ABC.
On October 17th, one of the most serious earthquakes in history struck the Bay Area. The Farmers Insurance Group of Companies has opened a special emergency claims center to process claims. Additional personnel have been added from all over the country to meet our policyholders' needs in the Bay Area. For immediate information, contact your farmer's agent or any farmer's agent. All stand ready to help. You can depend on it.
Emporium's having the biggest sale of the year. Save 25 to 50% at the 93rd birthday sale, starting this Saturday at Emporium.
Two words set Big O tires apart. Customer satisfaction.
Customer satisfaction, second to none. Big O.
If I have to fly to the coast, I want to fly in business class.
Why wait for Monday?
Find your own phone.
Every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, a sneak peek at next week's stories is yours for the calling.